Hi, Leanne. Thanks for coming in today and for bringing Lucy. I know you've just spent some time with the doctor and had a great appointment with them. So I'm here to talk to you and sort of do a follow-up on the conversation that they had with you. I'm Becky. I'm a registered veterinary technologist here, and the focus of our conversation is going to be about Lucy's weight and the conversation that you had. So just start, I haven't met you before, I haven't seen Lucy and haven't had any time with her. So tell me about Lucy's story. How did you come together? I find cat owners always have a great story with every cat that comes in. So tell me about how you came to have Lucy.
I found Lucy in a ditch about 11 years ago. She was little, not a kitten, but like mid-size.
Okay.
It was cold, it was winter, so I think she was thrown out of a vehicle or maybe in a motor or something, not sure. So she has some frostbite on her feet, I think all over her feet, and she also had her tail broken or frozen a bit, the tip, but she was fast to love everything that was going on and loves food.
How our conversation is going to go today, I think, is I'm going to ask you just a couple of questions about some medical history and a little bit about Lucy directly. I know we've got that information on our medical file, but just for you and I. Then I'm going to hear from you, kind of your conversation with the doctor about Lucy's weight. And then my ultimate goal is that we come up with a bit of a plan where we can work together and work on really decreasing Lucy's weight. And we'll talk about those impacts and the challenges that might face for you. So that's what I have on my mind for this conversation. What were you thinking about in regards to Lucy's weight, or a question that you might have, or something that you're kind of thinking about right now?
I do worry about it a little bit because in her older age, she started to limp a little bit. So obviously it's affecting her joints and stuff.
It sounds like, she's advancing in her age, which is 10 or 12, which is lovely. And she's obviously in really good health otherwise. But you had mentioned that now you're starting to see the limp. You're concerned that it is, her weight or additional weight is contributing to that, which kind of has a bit of a worry for you. And that you've had some, I would say, not success with a diet plan for her in the past. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll make sure that we talk about those two things as well when we kind of go through this, our conversation together, because I think those are really important, and we want to make sure that we address not just what we think about we need to do, but also to take into consideration the things that you're worried about with her, so that we can have a successful plan moving forward.
Sure.
As we kind of move on to the next part of our conversation together, let's start by you telling me the conversation that you had with the doctor regarding Lucy's weight. What was that conversation about?
Well, I brought her in because of the fact that I know she's a little overweight and then she has a bit of a limp. So it's just maybe changing something about her diet or figuring out how to go about that.
Okay, yeah. And you've mentioned before that you've tried diet. Was that, can you tell me what that was? Was it actually physically changing the food or reducing the food?
I changed the food for sure, something healthier, and then healthier wet food and stuff, and tried to do that, and maybe more not free feeding, which is what I usually do. But since I have two cats, it's a bit complicated.
That can be so challenging when you have two cats and you're trying to address the needs of both of them, and they might not be exactly the same, and they're different in age, and so I really appreciate that can be a real challenge for cat owners. And it does make it a little more complicated for sure.
Yes.
Okay. What is her whole daily food intake? What would a typical day look like for her as far as her feeding?
I give them free range of dry food.
Okay. So when you're doing like the free feeding of dry food, is it like 2 bowls for each of the cats, or one bowl and they both share out of the same bowl? Okay.
Yeah, 1 bowl and they share. And honestly, they don't go through a lot in a day. Like I probably put a cup in there and they don't finish that for 2 days.
Oh, okay. So when you say free feed, you're not filling it several times throughout the day. Do you measure how much goes in? Like, what would you think is about your amount that you're putting in there?
It's probably a cup to a cup and a half.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so if that goes in the morning, how much do you think is left at the end of the day, or the next day when you go to refill it?
A 1/4 cup the next day, I'd say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What is the decision maker for your dry food choice?
More brand. Like,
okay.
I bought them fancy food and stuff, and she doesn't seem to care about it. So she likes that stuff, and I mix the Kirkland, like whatever the regular cat food is, and then there's the indoor like weight controlled ones. I mix them together.
Okay, so that's leading me to my next set of questions, is her activity. Like, what would you, if you were to say Lucy's activity in a day includes
Waking me up for food.
Waking up, okay, yeah.
And
you
then
mentioned
she'll
that.
probably walk around the house a little bit. Like she's not very active. I have a pretty small place.
I think that's giving me a pretty good picture of where Lucy's at. You're feeding them wet food and dry food, and the dry food is you still are feeding her a sort of a weight reduction or a calorie reduced diet, but mixing it also with regular cat food, and then they have free choice throughout the day. Okay, so Leanne, before we get into our conversation about sort of how we can help Lucy reduce some weight, which is our ultimate goal here, of course, what do you know about the risks of her being overweight like she is right now? What's your understanding of what those concerns are?
I don't know a lot, but I'm assuming obviously her joints and stuff are affected right now. She doesn't have a lot of muscle tone in her legs, maybe because of not being active anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming there's probably heart conditions and that can go with that too, but I don't know.
You are absolutely right in being concerned about, her mobility, which you've already indicated there's some, there's some issues with her limping. And then your other comment about the worry on her heart and other internal organs. Having additional weight really can have a negative influence on internal organ function. And you're right on the money with the talking about, the heart, and that can be an additional burden for them. So you are already aware of what some of the risks and the concerns that we have are. I want to take you through just a very quick exercise with some resources that I have so we can take a look at where we think she's at, like her body shape. And it's a really interesting, it's called a body fat index, or a BFI for cats. So we're going to look at a diagram here. And it's a top-down diagram and a side diagram. And I want you to kind of look at the colored zones here and tell me where you think, which color you think Lucy is. And the green shape obviously is the ideal. Okay, so if you were to just look at these two, where would you say that you think Lucy is? What color would she be?
I think she's orange.
The orange. So not all the way out, not, that's sort of the mid zone.
Yeah.
And you can see against the body, there's a little bit of a hanging belly there, which she definitely has, and a little bit more padding up on the top of her back, and a little bit through here. So I think, your assessment is bang on. So this next piece I think is really important is then we have to look at what is her ideal weight. And then we're going to look at our strategies for how we do that. So when we get her weight, we'll compare her to what her weight is. We'll look at her being in that body fat index, and then we'll kind of aim for an ideal weight and talk about how we get there. So I think for moving forward, what we would do and what our plan for Lucy would be, there's a few options. So I'm going to share them with you, and then you kind of work with me and tell me which ones you think might work or that you would be comfortable doing. So obviously the first thing is food. There's all kinds of different foods that we can choose that are not just less calories, but less calories with a little more fill. Because what we don't want is to feed way less food and then they're hungry all the time, right? And you kind of said that she does enjoy her food and she is food driven. The next thing, given what you said, is that we would control how much they eat. So the free feed, which you mentioned you do in the morning, it really would be helpful if we could schedule their feedings for both cats actually and put a smaller amount more frequently. The one advantage that I like about doing that is that when the food goes down, it's very fresh and then they're more inclined to eat it. So that would be the other thing I would think about, actually measuring, and we can show you how to measure and we can calculate what would be an appropriate amount for her and for your other cat. And then of course, if there's any way that you could increase her exercise, and I know you mentioned that she's quite sedentary and likes her sunbeam. Does she play with toys, or does she play with Juicy or Percy, like active play, or not really?
Now that I've been giving her the supplement and she's a bit perkier, she does play with the other cat a little bit.
Okay.
That's usually just sitting there swatting at each other. But yes, she does like to play.
And that's something fun you can do, depending on your schedule. And I'll ask you about that here in a minute. But the concept of feeding regularly throughout the day, they can do a little activity before they eat. Even with cats, you can throw a little treat across the floor. If you can take 3 or 4 minutes and have them work for their food, that's something that cats naturally do anyway. How's that sitting with you? Those are,
Yeah.
what are those 3 things for you, do you think, that you're...
Definitely doable. I don't know. I never thought about throwing treats for her.
What about the scheduled feeding? Like not just the free feed in the morning. What are your thoughts on that? Like with what, how your lifestyle would go?
Yeah, my dog demands 2 walks a day, so I have to be home in the morning and the night to do that. So I could definitely do a morning and evening feed.
Okay, that's great. We're going to weigh her so that we know what her baseline is today. Then we're going to look at, we're going to estimate what we think an ideal body weight, so that gives you a bit of a goal. And then the next thing that we'll do is, I think we should set a schedule for you to come in every couple of weeks so we can do some weighings. And then that way we can check in together, and you can tell me, oh, she's loving the food, she's hating the food, she doesn't do the treat, I've taught her this trick. What do you think would be your greatest challenge with any of these things?
That's a good question. I don't think it'll be totally fine, because nothing else going on in the days, mornings and evenings.
Okay.
So it's totally fine.
So it's doable, and then we can, and then I think what we'll do today, we're going to weigh her, and we need to do like the side profile picture and the top down picture, just like the diagram. So we have a starting point. And then we'll set up these little mini consults where you could just pop in, we'll meet, or one of the other technologists will meet with you. And then we'll do a little weigh-in. And at that time, you can take your phone and we'll do the side and profile shots. Then we can really watch the progression. What we don't want is her losing weight too quickly. We don't want her staying stagnant. And then as she loses and changes her little body shape, when she gets to the ideal point where we're comfortable with her body fat index, we're comfortable with her look and her muscle and all that, then we can look at adjusting the diet to a regular maintenance one. Okay, we'll do her weight, we'll take her photo, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Awesome.